So yeah, obviously since we've spoken, we've realized we have like lots in common and things like that around our interest in ARFID. So I'm really curious to hear some of your answers to those questions. And then also because it's a new working relationship, I'm also curious to hear all the ways that you like to work with clients and learn a bit about you today. So
Okay.
let's start.
Yeah. So the way that I work with clients is in a trauma-informed, person-centered way. I work and I'm always trying to, I guess, understand the person, but also the eating disorder in its context, what it's protecting you from, and how it's helping you cope, and what it costs you. Because I think also an eating disorder can come at a huge cost to the person. I think particularly with ARFID, it is very misunderstood. So a lot of people will
Hmm.
be trying to get you to just eat, to just do things, and there's not really an understanding of um, how it causes such distress. So I work with a person to understand the true impact that it's having on you and the symptoms, because ARFID and eating disorders, I think, because I work with both, it's really hard to separate my love for both of them. ARFID can be sensory, it can be a neurodivergence, it can be trauma, it can be so many things. And so I think it's quite nuanced in how it affects people and also families. So I think it's working with the individual and the families and the child and the adult, to help them understand how it's affecting them, and then how we then start untangling and unpicking it so we can find ways and strategies of how we intervene, and then working with it so it no longer undermines a person.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many grand assumptions made with our ARFID clients, or you hear of their stories before they come through our
Mm.
doors. So like, oh, you're not autistic, or you don't have a neurodiversity, therefore you can't have ARFID, or
Mm.
choking is not a trauma, that kind of thing. And you hear a lot of these statements that stop people getting help for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the important work comes, which is maybe a bit of normalizing and letting the person tell their story before we start to work with them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I think sometimes it has been there a lot longer, and then has really started to be internalized into how a person thinks, feels, and believes, well, actually, how they feel about themselves. And so you're right, it's actually we start to listen to the person and gain an understanding of, I think, what art truly means to them, and then we can start to unravel and unpick it. Yeah.
Hmm. Definitely.
Mm.
And how would you describe your therapy style, Jackie?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would have to say I'm a pluralist, so I work in a very pluralistic way. Um, and that means that I work very much with the individual to gain an understanding of, so it will be like CBT, AR, CBT Maudsley, but then I'll also bring in compassion focused therapy. Um, and it will be very much like ACT and other modalities that I will feel like at that time will be needed to help the person move forward, to help the person diffuse from the thoughts that they're thinking, to help the person unhook from what is happening to them, to really help that person work in that moment, but also in a very strategic way in how we are moving forward. So it's very,
Hmm.
very planned, but it's also very, very going, oh my gosh, do you know, this is what is happening to you right now. Do you know what I mean? So, like, your nervous system is responding in this way. This isn't because of who you are. This is because what is happening to your body. And I think fundamentally, when we work like that with a person, it gives them a great sense of understanding of, my goodness, like, this is my body and this is how my body is functioning. And also, that then allows them to identify that they aren't the problem, that this is a
Hmm.
natural, normal human response. And when they have that understanding, it then removes the I'm the problem, and they can then have a lot more compassion about who they are. So it takes away this, I think a lot of the time, this the internalization of like, oh, I'm always the problem because I can't just eat, because I can't just do that. So we can remove that away from the equation, and it makes it a lot easier then to continue with the strategy on how we move forward with CBT, AR, and all the other things, and can give a person a lot more. Yeah, just compassion and understanding, and then have more of a relational depth of who they are. So we can keep going top down and bottom up approach simultaneously, and then
Mm-hmm.
that just helps recovery really take meaning and shape, and give a person an understanding of, oh my gosh, this me. And then you just see that alignment of an empowerment and confidence and self-belief then take shape. And that's really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it really empowers the person, which is the good bit. You really hear their voice when you work in
Yes,
that way.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I know earlier you said it's hard to, or whether we even have to split our love for eating disorders or ARFID. But
Mm.
I guess my next question for you is what kinds of clients do you most often work with?
Um, oh, and if there it is both. So I
Mm,
do work with both. So I do have a lot of ARFID clients that I work with, um, and a lot of children and a lot of adults with ARFID that I work with. And a lot of parents that are trying to support children with ARFID is also who I work with. Um, so definitely something that I support. And then I also have a lot of a lot of older clients that come in that are working with eating disorders, uh, where the eating disorder has been internalized, if that makes sense. So I think
mm-hmm.
it's both, but ARFID is definitely more, and I think that is because it has become more known in society now. So art is definitely something that I'm working with more and more and more and more. And that I think is because it has now um, become more known in society and to people, and named and put out there in the DSM-5, and is now being diagnosed. So I think
Mm-hmm.
with that, I am call out there. I think after has been something that I'm dealing with more in my practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think an acknowledgement from the medical society, funny enough, has maybe too much, but a huge impact on what then gets shared in the media. Because if a doctor says,
Yes.
this is a problem, then people will go, okay,
Yeah.
this is something that we can talk about now. And I
Yes.
think that's always really underestimated the power of that within health practitioners. But
Yeah.
also, what I liked about what you said is ARFID is all ages, as well as eating disorders and many, many other disorders, but it doesn't discriminate with age. And maybe nowadays we
Mm.
have more of a vocabulary, or people have a shared vocabulary to be able to identify these are actually difficulties that I don't have to live with, but I can do something about.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. What do you think is the most important thing for your
Yeah.
clients
Yeah.
to?
And
Oh,
I
sorry.
think, no, 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 it's okay. I think like you're very right. I think the vocabulary is there. I think before, like what it was known as, like you were fussy, you were picky, and selective eating disorder was put out there. Whereas now it's kind of like uh, a lot of adults coming up there. It's like all of a sudden the penny sort of dropped. It's like, oh, actually, I'm not this, and I could be, and now being able to respond and reach out and feel more able to get the support that they need, because actually, me eating this particular way is a problem, and not feeling, I think, shame or ashamed of potentially having a problem, and then wanting to get support for it. So I quite like what you just said there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think is the most important thing for your clients to know before they start therapy with you?
Um, I think I think therapy can be pretty scary for anybody, and I think um, I think a lot of the time, people are never sure if it's the right time to step into therapy, and there's always that ambivalence. Um, and and I think honor that. I think it's never going to feel like the right time. I think therapy can feel scary. I think be open and honest, and know that it's a collaborative approach. It's something that is never forced. And I think um, we take it at the pace and the rate that you are ready for. I think nothing is ever done to you and should never be done to you. Um, and it can be such a powerfully healing experience, that can bring so much. So it can be really positive. Um, and I think that's the one thing I want people to understand, that actually it can be quite slow, but it's done at the pace that you're ready for. And that's one thing that I want them to know. It's a really collaborative approach.
Hmm. Absolutely. And it's never going to be you just telling them what to do. It's going to
Mm,
be about you realizing or helping them understand what they want to do first and what direction they want to go in.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But also it's kind of uh it is about food, but it isn't about food. And I think obviously this is, I think, we would be remiss if we kind of weren't looking at the disorder at the same time. So it's kind of, um, working with us, we're always going to be mindful of that. And so it's kind of, we don't allow, I think that's the one thing, we don't allow the eating disorder to tiptoe out the room either. So it's kind of like with ARFID, we're very, very mindful that it's not about force, and it's not about food, and it's not about shoving it in your face and all of that type of thing. But it is mindful that we have to always be careful that we're not colluding with the disorder, so that we don't enable the avoidance, that we don't enable
Hmm.
the restriction, that we don't become that type of practitioner, but we're doing it in a way, and we're helping you in a way that feels really empowering and collaborative, and that we are all part of the process. So, and it's really, really empowering.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And obviously, a lot of us have been able to help people with ARFID by learning more about CBT-AR, but the foundation of that is CBTE. So CBT-AR being cognitive behavioral therapy for ARFID, and CBTE being the kind of golden standard that's been around for quite a while for cognitive behavioral therapy for eating disorders, so
Mhm.
anorexia, bulimia, binge eating, etc. How would you say you support clients through those early stages of treatment using CBTE and CBTAR? And the reason I'm asking those questions is because it's quite a physiological part of treatment. And
Mhm.
it's a part where we really do have to talk about food within
Mm.
our therapy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. We do. We have to focus on food. We have to focus on the structure. We have to look at what's going on. We have to focus on the exposure. We have to put in place, um, we have to look at the thoughts. We have to look at the restructuring. We need to look at like what is going on, because these types of cognitions, if we don't sort of look at understanding what is in place and what is like what the thought current status quo is, and how you're responding and the thought process, and then going, actually, how do we reframe that, and how do we then look at the challenge response to that? How are we then ever going to elicit any form of alternate response to that? So, in a
Mhm.
way, what we do then do is go, okay, so what is currently going on? And then how do we then respond uh, in that? And what do we introduce to alter that response? And how do we
Yes.
then look at the approaches to introduce that response? And then also, how are we looking at the body's response to those changes that we're going to introduce, so that we can get some change in place using exposure, using food, and all of the things that actually we are currently not doing, so the avoidance and the restriction. And we use CBTAR as a way of doing that for ARFID so that we can get food and exposure and the sensory aspects introduced to it in a controlled manner. I'm not saying we're going to like get everybody eating everything and touching everything and all of a sudden, enmesh them into a room of the worst smell that they could ever have, but we do it in a sensible, safe way where somebody can be exposed to something. Very, very light touch, but it is we need to look at that,
Hmm.
and CBTAR and CBT is the way that we would do that. And
Absolutely.
that's what I think I was alluding to, going, if we don't do that, we would be colluding with the eating disorder. So it's kind of like going, CBTAR would be the approach on how we do that.
Yeah.
And then reframing the thoughts using the food exposure and doing all those types of ways to help a person um, engage with food, smells, the sensory aspects in a safe way.
Hmm. Absolutely. And I'm curious, when we talk about the types of clients that we never choose the clients that walk who approach us, right? We can put
Mm.
out our information, we can let them know a bit about us and what we're willing to work with, but usually something about us attracts certain kinds of clients. So a lot of the
Mm.
clients that I've had have had fear of vomiting, and also fear of body reactions to food. Can you tell me more about what kind of clients have walked through your door with regards to ARFID presentations? Because I've heard you talk a lot
Mm.
about sensory sensitivities, and I kind of get a feeling that that's where you naturally maybe go towards.
Um, I've had quite a lot. I've had emetophobia. I've had uh, sensory sensitivities, so clients, lots of emetophobia, quite a lot
Same.
where actually the sensory aspects were actually unable to touch. So I've had clients come in where actually physically unable to touch anything. They've had gloves on, um, really struggling at school because they aren't able to touch things. The gag response is, really, really prominent. Um, uh, the number of foods that have been eaten is very, very limited, down to two or three in terms of the numbers of foods that they're able to eat. So quite restrictive. Very low weight, low hunger. So the pace and the rate at which food is being eaten, they're incredibly slow eaters. So to try and get, say, a slice of toast eaten just for breakfast is taking all the way up to lunchtime. So it's taking quite a while. So I think the types of clients that I'm seeing are very varied. And then what we're trying to do is getting them, first of all, to be able to touch things so that the gloves are being, coming off. So getting them exposed to different sensory in terms of what they're able to access and touch, so that they're able to engage in classroom activities, for example. Um, but also they're able then to engage in food without having such a strong gag response. And then actually they're able to physically eat different foods as well. So
Hmm.
it's quite broad. Um,
Yeah.
but also then have showers and things like that because it affects in such a big and broad spectrum. Um, but then also where the restriction in terms of food is where some children are only eating 2 to 3 foods. We want to have a look at the types of foods that they're having and then be able to introduce food chaining from the foods that they currently are, and then do the expansion of the foods based on what they're currently having. Even if that means we're introducing different shapes with the same foods, how are we looking at doing that so that we can have that expansion of food taking place, to then link. I don't know if it's chicken, we can go from chicken nuggets to chicken goujons to chicken, whatever it is, but we're broadening that range out
Hmm.
so that actually we're introducing different foods that way, and then it gives them expansion uh, in that sort of in variety, but different ways. Does that make sense? So they at least have some
Absolutely.
sort of safety. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and
definitely.
then the emetophobia is sort of another category where it's also the contamination and the OCD and a different form, but you're starting to overlap in what you're seeing with regards to ARFID and the overlap of things. And I think that's also where ARFID becomes interesting, because you can have ARFID and then you can have it start overlapping with conditions as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it is such complex work, but very rewarding work, because I
Mm.
think a lot of the process is learning to separate, this, your anxiety and your fear of food are separate. Your fear of
Yes,
vomiting and your fear of food is separate.
yes,
And when we start to get into that mode of exposure work and helping clients almost navigate, externalize those thoughts, then we start the real work, because they feel really
yes,
empowered where they go, I felt really anxious today, but I was able to eat,
yes,
right? And
yes,
that's such a lovely turning point for the
absolutely.
clients.
Absolutely, because then they can learn to self-regulate and start managing themselves despite what is going on
Mm-hmm.
in the world around them. Like if they've got like GCSE exams going on, for example, I can manage that anxiety of those exams and I can still eat. So it's kind of like being able then to become self-sufficient without things starting to bump into me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can split things out. And it's almost like I want to start doing this, but I can start
Exactly.
doing that and being a bit more robust in how I
Mm-hmm.
am managing things. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really quite
Absolutely.
powerful. Yeah, yeah,
It is. Absolutely. And so obviously we have a lot of hope because we've seen so much change in our clients. But
yeah.
when we start working with them, there's a lot of anxiety and maybe a lack of hope. What do you think tends to be helpful for the anxious or overwhelmed clients who are still stuck in that really restrictive phase at the beginning of treatment?
Sorry, what do I think can be?
What tends to be helpful, or what can be helpful to give clients hope when they're stuck at that beginning part of treatment?
Um, that actually that change is possible, and that by you just stepping in, you've just proved to yourself that even that is in itself uh, showing that there's room for possibility.
Mm.
So that in itself has just shown that actually, I always go like you haven't snuffed yourself out. Because there's I always look at it like the analogy of a candle, and the wick of the candle is still burning, and by you stepping into therapy, you haven't snuffed yourself out. So there is evidence and proof in itself that you are still holding that light. And I think that is so beautiful. I get really emotional that by a client just doing that, that is
Mhm.
itself an expression that hope still exists. So hold on to that and just know by doing that, oh my God, what is just about to come is incredible, and it's so
Mhm.
exciting. So um oh, I just want to start working with somebody now. I'll get myself all excited.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Because it does happen, and that
yeah,
does shimmer through
yeah,
when you start doing the work. And it just
yes,
takes that
absolutely.
openness and willingness to try and to be curious, not necessarily to know exactly what to do or to be able to do it, whatever
Yeah,
it is. It's just showing up.
yeah,
That's already powerful. And
yeah,
a lot of times for clients, they feel like, in my experience, they feel like they need, like, well, I haven't eaten a whole bowl of salad or soup or, whatever scares them. So I've clearly failed. And it's actually breaking it down for them and saying,
yeah,
just talking about that food is already a huge step, right?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
even clients with emetophobia, fear of vomiting, even just saying the word sick is is a step,
yeah,
right? Even being
yeah,
able to talk about wanting to get over this fear. And
yeah,
I know where when a client's at the beginning, these things can feel really insignificant because they should be easy. But just being able to say, actually, these things aren't easy is humbling, I find.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's just being able to consider coming into therapy
Mm,
is a concept in itself that can be quite difficult. So it's kind of notice that every step along the way is a process, and it's honor where you are in that process and going,
yes.
okay, even that is something. So it's being more forgiving and notice when that inner critic pops in.
Yep.
Yeah, because we all
Yeah,
have that inner critic. It's like, no, 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 not today, thank you. So it's kind of like, yeah, be a little bit more forgiving and kind, I think, to ourselves when we notice that inner critic stepping in.
absolutely. And so I I think this is a good step, a good part to jump forward into the Eating Disorders Awareness Week
Mm,
um, theme, which is community, because a lot of what you just discussed is learning or helping the client realize they're not alone in this by just talking about it, is stepping out and asking for help is a huge step. And I think the
yeah.
community or the village or the people that you have around you is so important, which is why I'm excited for this year's theme. So I'm curious for you, Jackie, in the context of eating disorders, what does community mean to you?
Well, I think it's what eating disorders do is they thrive in isolation.
Yeah.
So for me, having uh, the theme of community, I thought was fantastic because with that, actually, it allows you to tap out into support, which then breaks down the isolation, which then brings about recovery, which then brings about a space where actually you have the ability to be seen, to have a voice, to recover, to be heard. Because a lot of the time, I think what happens with an eating disorder is there's a lot of, I don't want to say, there's a lot of invalidation or silence or shame or just this not being seen or heard and loneliness. And so the community and having that this year can be really powerful in somebody not being so alone. So it's quite
Mm-hmm.
exciting. Yeah, really
Mm-hmm.
exciting. And going, if there's one thing that I have found is it's a very, very welcoming, supportive community that will um, not be your harshest critic, but will be the most welcoming promoter and source and beacon of hope and light that you can have. And so, if anybody doubts that they're able to do this, all I can say is take that first step because you'll be amazed by the amount of encouragement and support that you will get.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I guess within that as well is when it comes to breaking that isolation, eating disorders also thrive in secrecy, right? If
Mm,
and secrecy is not just like having a secret, that's like a sparkly thing. It's actually the secret of how I'm feeling right now, the secret that
yeah,
this is hard for me right now.
yeah,
And that's where the silencing comes, and just learning to break that isolation and share these secrets is
yeah,
so powerful because, like with trying food, the first time the anxiety will be the highest, but like speaking out and asking for help, the first
yeah,
time will be the most anxiety provoking, but it does
yeah,
get easier. So I
yeah,
guess, yeah, it's learning that it does become easier. You do feel less alone and more understood as we
yeah,
move forward.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think you gain understanding for yourself, which can be the most powerful. Even if you feel misunderstood by everybody else, it's kind of as long as you understand yourself, who cares? Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I think
Exactly.
that's what grows is that self-confidence and the understanding of self, and that can be the most powerful shift through the recovery process.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so with the community obviously comes family. I always say to my clients that at first when you have a problem, you might try to solve it yourself. If you can't solve it yourself, you'll turn to your nearest and dearest. usually
Yeah.
family, and then maybe you might go to your friends, your support networks, and then medical professionals, etc. I'm curious about what role do you think the therapeutic relationship plays in building a sense of community around someone?
In terms of family.
In terms of building a sense of community around ARFID or an eating disorder or getting help, what role do we
Mm.
play as therapists?
Huge. I
Mhm.
think we play a
Yes,
really important role in building that sort of community for somebody. I think we do that already, like within the therapy room, but I think outside of that, I think within, well, for me, I don't know, it's like I think it goes beyond that as well. So um within the GP's practice, working with those wider connections, I think it's quite an important role. Um, and then on a wider context, I think it's really important. Well, for me on a personal level, I do quite a bit of like advocating, and I think promoting of like what is ARFID, how can it affect? So on a wider role, also working with families so that they understand how they can also be supporting their loved ones and their families and what it is.
exactly.
Because I think a lot of the time, um, families can feel a bit like at a loss of what they can be doing and don't actually fully understand the rules and how to support their children or their loved ones with it. So I think it's really important that the therapist can help with that communication, with how it is that they should be working with them and answer those questions and facilitate that. So then families also don't feel like they're failing. Do you know what I mean? Or parents don't
Yeah.
feel like, oh my gosh, I've caused this problem. So that can be a really important part of the therapeutic process as well.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Definitely. And, us being humans and having gone through life as well, I don't know if you can relate to this, but even at times when things are difficult, I can think, oh, there's no one around me. And I think the therapist can be a good, or our roles can be to point out actually, this is how you can connect. This
yeah,
is who you could connect. This is
yeah,
why you can connect. And I think that
yeah,
that does, make someone feel kind of more centered within
yeah,
feeling overwhelmed and alone.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so we're coming towards the end, and I'm quite excited to ask you this question because I felt quite a lot of passion and how you work and so on. And I feel that passion as well. Like you said earlier, like I'm excited now. I just want to go work with a client. So I'm curious to ask you, what do you enjoy most about the work that you do?
Um, Getting to know the client, watching the transformation. And it can be so, I think sometimes I don't think the client that I am working with notices the shift until they notice the shift. But you are always noticing it. Um and then it's like, oh, you just see the transformation. And that I will never ever get bored of because it's just it's just so powerful. And to see someone heal, it sounds quite corny, doesn't it? And then see their life change in not just their eating. I think this is the thing. It's not just about their eating. You see their school life, you see their social life, you see their relationships, you see them change, you see it changes like on an exponential rate. And seeing that and how much it brings them, how much joy and how much life it can bring somebody, I will never get bored of that.
Hmm.
That's the
Yeah,
thing that I like
absolutely.
working with. Mm,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely enjoying seeing that change, enjoy being part of that ride or being allowed to be a part
yeah,
of this. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. And
absolutely.
then sometimes I think even being shocked because then you don't sometimes fully recognize, like, oh my God, I never in my days thought that that would bring that. So you're like, even sometimes when you find out, um, you get surprised yourself. So,
Hmm.
um, Yeah, we're so blessed in the work that we are doing, and it's an absolute honor and a privilege. Yeah, I love it. Mm. I get
Yes.
really emotional.
That's
Yeah,
good. I feel the same. And I think
yeah,
I'm very happy to be able to work with people like you as well, because we
yeah,
can offer something that sadly isn't offered in many NHS provisions
yeah.
across the UK and so on. So for me, that makes the work that we do have even more of
Worthwhile.
a stronger purpose, because
Yeah,
there are people who have been looking for help for a very long time, and
yeah,
we can be part of helping them see that light, or that candle that you described earlier.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
thank you so much, Jackie. I feel like that
You're
was really
very welcome.
helpful, and it was really lovely to spend a bit more time with you and get to know
You're
you a bit
welcome.
more. So,
Thank
yes,
you. You're very, very
great.
welcome.